professional fantasy football league players. Welcome to the weekly waiver show for week 5. By now, you know what this show is. I'm your host, Josh Martin. I'm going to give you the guys you need to add and the guys you need to drop so we can edit your roster, get you set to make it down the home stretch. We're almost halfway through the season. You're starting to take shape on what your team's going to look like. You know what your league is going to look like. If you're in Tier 3, you're starting to make a move so you can win your league to move up to Tier 2. I'm going to give you the guys that'll help you do that. Tier 2, you don't want to be there forever, do you? Let's win your league so you can move up to Tier 1. And Tier 1, you need that big prize money, so I'm going to help you get it. And you want to maintain your credibility. You're in Tier 1. You're at the top of the PFFL. Let's make sure you stay there. So let's jump right into it. No horsing around. I got guys that are going to be key players to your team this week. I got a running back who is 0% owned, who I think could be a good goal line back. A wide receiver who's 0% owned, who might be a number 2. Plus, I got a tight end for you who still is not 100% owned, but I know he should be. As far as the drops go, I got running backs who are over 95% owned, wide receivers who are not even playing that are still owned by a lot of teams, and a tight end who I think I'm going to catch a lot of flack for, but I'm going to tell you to cut. But first, it's time for Out of the Pocket.
He drops back, under pressure, scrambling around. He's out of the pocket. He's got to find someone.
This is the guy who, if you're desperate, need someone to fill in a position. It's a guy I think is the one that you should add and probably start this week. This week at the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, Christian Ponder. Bye weeks are coming up. That's going to be a huge theme of this show and probably the show for the next few weeks. You need guys that can fill in for your buys. Christian Ponder could be that guy for this week. He's playing Tennessee. Tennessee gives up the second most points to quarterbacks in fantasy. It's a good matchup at home. The following week, he's playing Washington, who gives up the 4th most. Now, the week after that, he's got Arizona. That's a tough matchup. But the next 2 weeks, if you got buys that you need to fill in one of the 2 weeks, Christian Ponder's the guy. Pick him up this week. You could start him over a number of guys at quarterback whose production hasn't been what it's supposed to be, like Phillip Rivers, for example, who I'm not saying you should drop, but you might start Christian Ponder over him. So that's the out-of-the-pocket guy for this week, week 5 of the PFFL. I'm excited. I hope you are. We're moving right along. The season's flying by. It's kind of a shame. Wish it would last forever. Staying at quarterback for a guy I think you should add, again, for bye week fill-in, Ryan Tannehill. This is a guy who is all of a sudden coming on. I'm not sure if he's the real deal yet, but if you need someone to fill in, he could be a good guy. This week, he's at Cincinnati. Cincinnati gives up the 8th most points to quarterbacks in fantasy football. It's a guy you could start this week. Not maybe going forward, but definitely if you need someone to fill in your buys and someone like Ponder's already taken. Another guy is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Pick him up, put him on your bench. You're not going to start him for the next 2 weeks. He plays San Francisco and Arizona. But the week after that, he plays Tennessee at home. Still, they give up the 2nd most points against quarterbacks. And then he's got a bye. But like I said, if you've got a guy who's on bye in week 7, pick up Fitzpatrick now. I'll give you a couple of guys you can drop off your roster. Don't worry. But Fitzpatrick is only 80% owned. By the way, Tannehill is 0% owned. Fitzpatrick's 80% owned, so he's probably owned in your league. But if he's not, pick him up. At running back, I've been telling you about this guy for a couple of weeks now. He is still only 19% owned in PFFL, and that's Lamar Miller of the Miami Dolphins. Here's the thing about Miller. Obviously, Reggie Bush is the man, right? Daniel Thomas still getting some goal line carries. Sure. Moving forward for the rest of the season, Lamar Miller is going to start taking those carries. He's working on his pass blocking in practice. That's the thing that's keeping Daniel Thomas in there. Once Lamar Miller gets that down, which I believe he will, you're going to see a lot more of Lamar Miller. And his matchups are favorable. Cincinnati, St. Louis, the Jets, all in the top 11 of points given up to running backs in fantasy football. The next running back I want you to add, but I want you to do it with some caution. What I mean by that is make sure you're not giving up a guy you might need to pick this guy up. But if you've got one of the guys who I'm going to give you in the next segment when we talk about drops, Brandon Bolden is an interesting add in New England. Now, generally speaking, I I tell people to stay away from the New England running back situation. I tweeted this out on Sunday. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33. You can send me any sort of questions that you have about who you should add or who you should drop throughout the week. But I tweeted out on Sunday, looks like New England might start figuring out who should be the running back. And then all of a sudden, Bolden came out of nowhere, right? So Stephen Ridley's clearly the guy that you can trust the most. You still have Danny Woodhead. Now you got Bolden mixed in. Thing about Bolden, I think from what I saw of the comments from Brady and Belichick, they like Bolden a lot on the goal line. Kind of like Ben Jarvis Green Ellis last year. Production wasn't great, but he got touchdowns every few weeks. So like I said, I'm giving you a caution on this one, but I would say add him if you've got a guy who I have in the next segment that you can drop. Bolden might be a good bye week fill-in. Excuse me. Moving on to wide receivers, the first guy on the list is T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts. This guy has got speed. He's small. He's 5'10", 183 pounds, but he runs a 4.3 40. And he is competing to be the number 2 receiver in Indianapolis. He's competing with Donnie Avery, but T.Y. Hilton is 0% owned. The next 4 weeks, he's home to Green Bay, who's 13th against wide receiver. The Jets, who do really well, but then he's got Cleveland, who is number 3 as far as the most points given up to wide receiver position in fantasy football. T.Y. Hilton is a guy that should be on your team. He will be a good bye week fill-in, and he might work his way into a flex starter in a permanent role, depending on how the rest of your roster looks. Next guy at wide receiver, this guy's going to be the pickup of the week, I guarantee it. That's Brian Hartline. I wanted to talk about him last week, and I didn't. Obviously, I should have, coming off of this huge game against the Cardinals. He had 253 receiving yards. Told you earlier, Tannehill looks like he could be the real deal. I think that goes for the same for Brian Hartline. Now, the problem is, the next 3 out of 4 weeks, he's got horrible matchups. Cincinnati is 24th against wide receivers, giving up the 24th most points. St. Louis gives up the 30th most points, and then he's got the Jets, who give up the 25th most points. And in between that, he's got a bye week. So I caution you with Hartline because of the matchups. However, it looks like that Dolphins offense might be for real, and they got to throw to somebody. And it looks like it's going to be Hartline deep. So he might be in the same sort of mold as like Deshaun Jackson, maybe. If he gets opportunities, 1 or 2, he's going to take it to the house. But the next few weeks are going to be tough. Guy I like better than Hartline maybe is Andre Roberts, who is emerging as the number 2 wide receiver in Arizona. He's got St. Louis this week, who is actually really good against wide receivers. Actually, St. Louis is really good against everyone. If you have someone playing the Rams, be careful. They give up the 26th most points to quarterbacks, 30th to wide receivers, and 27th to tight ends. Against the run, they're not so great, but if you've got a tight end or quarterback playing the Rams, be careful. And also wide receivers. So I don't like him this week, but the week after he plays Buffalo, who gives up the 5th most points to wide receivers. Great week. Great matchup. Pick him up now. Stash him. Got a bye week. Look, Larry Fitzgerald gets all the coverage in Arizona. Somebody's got to catch. And if Andre Roberts is in single coverage, he's going to get those receptions. The last guy I want to tell you about adding is someone I've been telling you about since the beginning of this show. He has been on every show so far. He was my out-of-the-pocket guy the first week. He was on last week's show. That's tight end for the Buffalo Bills, Scott Chandler. He's got 42 points in 4 weeks. Coming off that monster week last week when he scored 18 in PFFL. He is still only 61% owned. Now, I know. Save your tweets. I get it. He's playing San Francisco this week. San Francisco gives up the 10th most points to tight ends. Fitzpatrick's going to need help. He's going to be looking for him. If they can get to the red zone, Chandler's his safety net. He's going to score touchdowns. He's only 61% owned in PFFL. If he's not owned in your league, go get him today. You can start him over a lot of guys at tight end, like Jermichael Finley, Jason Witten. He's got more production than those guys. Or the tight end I'm going to give you right now. Welcome to the drop segment. This guy I'm going to take a lot of flack for. and I understand if you disagree. But I look at who I'm telling you to drop. I look at production. And if a guy's not producing for you, especially if you're in tier 3, you can't waste your time on him. Season is limited. It's week 5 already. You can't waste your time on a guy like Antonio Gates, who only has 12 points through 4 weeks. There's guys like Martellus Bennett, Scott Chandler, Dennis Pitta, Heath Miller. All of those guys are available in most leagues. Drop Antonio Gates and pick up Scott Chandler. Like I said, I'm talking about getting you to a position where you can win your league so you can move up. You want to win the prize money. You're professional fantasy football players now. It's not for fun anymore. That's what I'm here for. Antonio Gates is wasting your time. He's wasting your roster spot, especially if you're still starting him. He's not getting your production. Is he going to have a week where he goes off? Probably. But are you going to know when that's going to be? Not at all. Not at all. Next, guys, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because these are guys who, it's not matchup based. It's not, you're looking at who to drop. It's not matchup based. It's not looking at guys who might be here or there having a bad day. It's guys that are just showing a trend at this point. Mark Ingram is still 100% owned. He's got 15 points in 4 weeks. Jonathan Stewart, sure, he's hurt, but D'Angelo Williams is emerging as the number 1 guy. He's owned in 95% of leagues. Mark Ingram's owned in 100%. Drop them both. Isaac Redman, they're on bye this week, and then Mendenhall's coming back. Drop Isaac Redman, still owned in 71% of leagues. Robert Meacham, 9 points in 4 weeks. He's not getting the targets. When you're looking at wide receivers, what you want to look for to know if the production is going to come or not is targets. Robert Meacham isn't getting any. He's owned in 80% of leagues. Drop him. Austin Collie and Laurent Robinson are both hurt. Austin Collie is on the IR. He's still owned in 28% of PFFL. If you've got Austin Collie on your roster, wake up, pay attention, drop him. Pick up Brian Hartline or Andre Roberts. Laurent Robinson is hurt. He's out for the next few weeks. Drop him. It's not worth your time. That Jacksonville offense is not producing other than Maurice Jones-Drew, so he's not worth holding on to. And the last guy I want to talk about is Randy Moss. Still owned in 76% of PFFL. 14 points in 4 weeks. This is a guy who you knew whether or not he was going to be back in the first 4 weeks. And he's just not. Don't waste a roster spot on him. He's not a good bye week fill-in. Drop him today. So that's the show for this week. Thank you for joining me as always for the weekly Waiver Wire show. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at JoshMartin33. Send me any of your add and drop questions throughout the week. I'll read them on next week's show. We'll start getting some live tweets mixed into the show. Remember, you can listen to all the great PFFL Radio Network content we have here at PFFL Radio. PFFL Live is coming up on Thursday. They'll get you all the news. Stardom Sid'em show with yours truly is on Friday, and then PFFL Live Breaking News is on Saturday. Listen to everything so you can set your lineup right, make sure you win, and start winning your leagues. I'm your host, Josh Martin. Remember, keep smiling, keep listening, and always look both ways.